Hey friends, it's your girl Jasmine, aka Jazzy Jet Sets, aka Jazz, and today I'm gonna be bringing you the 5 best and worst things about living in South Africa. So one of the best things about living in South Africa is definitely the people. For one, they're super down to earth and friendly. My first weekend when I moved here, I went to some market just by myself to check it out. And I left with a new friend, and this person has been my friend for the last few years since I've been living here. So yeah, shout out to Sive. I feel like South Africans also kind of remind me of Black Americans a little bit. And just kind of like the way they carry themselves, their energy, their creativity, the hustle, and just this idea that, you know, despite hardships or whatever it is they may be going through, there's still joy. You still see joy in people. And then also, I think it's a really diverse country. I love that about South Africa. There's so many different people here. It's really considered to be the land of opportunity on the continent. So a lot of people migrate here to make a living for themselves. So there's a chance that you could meet someone and they might not actually even be from South Africa, which is just really cool. I really appreciate being able to interact with so many different cultures and different kinds of people. Number 2, cost of living. That's one of the best things about living abroad, and one of the main elements that you really need to consider whenever you're thinking about the pros and cons of moving abroad. So I save significantly more money here than I did when I was living in the States. I've lived in Atlanta, I've lived in Washington, DC, I've lived in Columbus, Ohio. I'm from New Jersey, so I've spent a few summers in New York for internships and things of that nature. I've even lived in Boston as well. So living in those major cities, I save a lot of money living in South Africa. For example, I live in a 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom apartment, and my rent, and I live in a pretty nice area. It's supposed to be one of the more expensive areas of the city of Johannesburg, and I pay about $900 a month for rent. Probably not gonna find that in any of the major cities in the States right now. To include a couple of other elements in cost of living. So number 1, transportation. I don't drive in South Africa. I'm not really ready to shift my perspective and body and steering wheel to the other side of the road yet. So I've opted out of that. But I do take Uber to a lot of places, and over the weekend I caught maybe a 20-minute Uber somewhere and it cost me less than $10, if that gives you some perspective. Another thing I like to think about, groceries. So if you are shopping weekly for a single person or a single household, I spend maybe $60 to $70 a week at the grocery store, maybe a little more if I'm being more fancy and I'm going to Woolworths. Another element of cost of living would definitely be healthcare. My healthcare bills have not come up to more than $60 to $75, and I don't get a bigger bill in the mail once I leave the healthcare facility. And I've seen general practitioners, OBGYNs. Another element is that I actually saw a OBGYN earlier this year and asked about the egg freezing process and procedure, and I think that procedure is also cheaper in South Africa. The OBGYN quoted me $4,000, which I think that it's not that cheap in the US. And then the last thing that I like to include in cost of living is for my Black women out there, which is braiding and getting your hair braided. How much does it cost to get your hair braided? In South Africa, to get some medium-sized knotless braids, it would cost you maybe $100 US. And 100 is kind of on the high side. Typically you probably wouldn't pay that much. But that just gives you some perspective of how much it costs to get your hair done. And if you're planning to come here, do not get your hair done beforehand. Wait until you arrive in South Africa to get your hair done. So number 3 on the best things about living in South Africa would have to be the nature and beauty of this country. I'm talking mountains, beaches, the vineyards. I mean, it's so beautiful. South Africa is such a dynamic place in that way. You could literally drive maybe an hour out and see some really beautiful landscape and nature. It's really one of the best things about living here. Number 4 on the best things about living in South Africa would be accessibility. You can get to just about anywhere from South Africa. It is one of the most industrialized and tech advanced advanced economies. So a lot of people move here to make a living and start businesses, and you can get to just about anywhere in the world from here. I'm a travel Africa kind of girl, so I love traveling all over the continent, East Africa, West Africa. And then if you need to go to Europe or go to the US, there are always flights to and from those places. So I find that to be such a great benefit of being in South Africa. And number 5 on my list of best things about living in South Africa has to be December. December is the festive season, and it is probably the best time to come to South Africa. The energy, the lights, the weather, it's such a beautiful summer. It's not like extremely hot and like humid as you would find in like some other African countries. It's the perfect time, New Year. It's really one of the like most beautiful times to come and visit and experience South Africa. I personally love it because my birthday is in December, and as a Jersey girl, there was not much going on in December during the winter when you're already wrapping up Christmas and New Year's. But living in South Africa, like, my birthday is kind of a big deal. It's like peak summer. It's the best time of the year. So one of the not so great things about living in South Africa is definitely the inequality. As a Black American, like, that's one of the first things that I noticed whenever I touched down in South Africa, as you would imagine, because America knows that all too well. But yeah, a lot of the Black people in the country still live in quite poor conditions, especially as compared to their white counterparts. And I think the white people in the country make up less than 10% of the population, but they own about like 80 to 85% of the wealth in the country. So it really just like paints the picture of the inequality in the country. And it's really, you know, as you would imagine, the lasting impact of colonization and apartheid. So makes total sense, and probably not a surprise there. Number 2, load shedding. So load shedding is basically when you lose power or electricity for a certain period of time because the primary energy source is at capacity, so they have to offset some of the load. And basically, depending on where you are, your electricity will go out for 2, 3, 4 hours at a time. It is quite an inconvenience in the country. And one of the good things about it is that, like, in South Africa, you can usually get a schedule of like when load shedding will happen, so you can kind of prepare for it during certain windows. Also, many places, especially apartment buildings, might have backup generators. Yeah, load shedding can be one of the most inconvenient parts about living in South Africa, and that is coming from a Westerner with a lot of privilege. I totally understand, but it is just one of the toughest things about living in the country, and something you definitely need to consider if you're moving here or if you're even coming to visit, because it could also impact you as well. So number 3 on the not so great things about living in South Africa would definitely have to be gender-based violence. Gender-based violence is violence against women and girls, brutal violence, rape, things of that nature. It is something that's quite common in South Africa and that a lot of women face here. It is not something that I have experienced personally, but it is something that a lot of the women speak out about here. For example, there was a rideshare app called Bolt, very similar to Uber, but in South Africa, it was kind of considered to be an Uber alternative because it was cheaper, it was like much more convenient, there were more cars, more availability. I would have compared maybe to Lyft in the US, but I think the app and the company was much less regulated, so a lot of women were having like really negative experiences and violence as they were using this app. So now it has become something that has become pretty unsafe, and you don't even use the app anymore. Basically, you delete it, only use Uber. So yeah, gender-based violence is really a challenge in the country, and from my understanding, people say that there's not a lot of support from police for the victims of these types of violent situations. So number 4 on the not so great things about living in South Africa is phone theft. Hide your phones. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, South Africa is not a place where you can just kind of like just lollygag and like not pay attention when you have your phone out, whether that means you're outside of an establishment, whether that means you're maybe even inside some establishments. Phone theft is a big thing in South Africa, and it is something that many people, South Africans themselves, will tell you all the time, like, you need to watch your phone. Make sure you keep your phone in your pocket. I personally have had my phone stolen twice, and the good thing about it is that these situations are not usually violent or anything like that. It's really just like a quick swipe and you won't even know it. So the first time it happened to me, I was at Pride. I was kind of standing with a bunch of friends. I had my phone in my crossbody with it closed. I went in there about 10 minutes later and it was no longer in there. Didn't even feel it, didn't even know it escaped me. The second time that my phone got stolen was actually in a grocery store in Woolies, in Sandton, which is considered again to be like this like great safe space or like expensive area. I was in there, I got caught slipping. It was a whole mastermind operation. My phone was politely and softly slipped right out of my pocket. That was the last I saw of it. So yeah, if you're coming to South Africa, make sure that you are, just much more alert whenever it comes to your phone. Don't just kind of like be out and around all on your phone thinking that you can do the tourist and the influencer thing, because it can get snatched. And usually you just kind of got to take the L and get another phone, because you'll probably never get it back. Number 5 on the not so great things about living in South Africa would be the xenophobia. And I just want to start by saying, as an American, I have no room to judge or talk about the xenophobia that happens in a certain country, because my country knows that all too well. I just want to be very honest and provide some honest insight on what it's like living here and when you come here, depending on who you are, where you're from. But yeah, xenophobia is definitely a thing in South Africa. I have friends who are from Zimbabwe, friends who are from Nigeria, and I have heard lots of stories about how they've been discriminated against or how they've been targeted against because they are foreigners and living in South Africa. And there seems to be this disdain for foreigners who can kind of come and make a living for themselves. A lot of South Africans feel like, they come and take away like educational opportunities or job opportunities for them. So it's definitely a big challenge in South Africa that a lot of people are faced with who move here.